All right. Welcome to Morgan State University, and also welcome to our research and webinar series organized by the School of Education and Urban Studies. Today's session is a very special one. We are honoring the recent research of doctoral students, their identities and voices that they have explored as a part of their journey. And also we have a guest from Australia representing La Trobe University.
Because it sort of encapsulates something about us. Oh, if I can, here we go. But first off, I'd like to say so much to Sylvia Quinton. Hi Sylvia, just to say how wonderful it seemed, that sense of enjoying the journey. I so much enjoyed that idea. Egelin Pegamin, sorry, I've not got the pronunciation right. I realize that. But that idea of developing ourselves, I'll share with you what our research was about shortly. Megan Schutt for interacting with classrooms, and also that last speaker, Chantal Villemar, that talking about how it can be a lonely journey, but the importance of creating a community. We were a group of 12 students. We got together basically because this is during COVID. We were lonely, as Chantal was saying. We didn't have that sense of, well, we did, but there were some of us who didn't have that sense of camaraderie or community. And so we got together to share our journeys, what it meant to be on a PhD journey. I won't talk too long. Phil, Andrew, and Kumsang are going to be talking after me, and they're a lot better speakers than me. But just to say, it was an amazing research experience for us because we realized we could share not just our joys and prides and passions, but the doubts we were on, the hardship, the loneliness, the sense of challenge, and also this, which Phil may talk about more, a sense of what we call imposter syndrome or uncertainty. And I'll come back later to talk about some of the other themes that appear. But first off, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Vista, for this, and thank you so much for everyone else for talking about your own experiences. Just very quickly, if you can see this, we've got a picture of tomatoes and an egg. Sometimes we felt like the egg, sometimes we felt like a tomato. So sometimes we were a tomato and wanted to be the egg. And sometimes we were the egg and we were trying to be the tomato. So anyway, I just share that as a reflective point for you, and it's over to Kumsang. Oh, Dr. Vista, if we're going too far, there's three of us talking. Just say, guys, shut up. It's time to move on. Thank you. Okay, Kumsang, please.
Thank you, Michael. The case I present here is both my experiences and my self-reflections of my academic journey. As a Global South PhD student who studies in Global North, I feel that a sense of belonging to the academic environment of the host country is crucial for a person's career development. Yet I was not aware of its importance before I came to the host country. After I spent almost 3 years in Australia, I realized that the sense of belonging can be a source of motivation for academic engagement and confidence in everyday life. When I first came to Australia, I experienced some obstacles in my daily interactions. Firstly, the language barrier, which is very hard to overcome. Language usage in everyday life is different from what I had learned. But also after I had some awkward interactions with professors and peers, I lost my confidence to talk to people. Secondly, the way people socialize in the academic sphere is alien to me. For instance, as a part of academic activity, people stand up and intensively converse with each other as soon as presentations are finished. During these moments, it seems I really don't know where I should stand up or which group I should be part of. This is extremely confusing, awkward, and difficult for me. However, the university has been of very little help in this aspect of my academic life. For the university, it seems these are not part of academic training. At the same time, since the duration of a PhD student is limited, PhD study is limited, which for me is 3.5 years. I could not afford to spend a lot of extra time navigating this aspect of everyday life to get used to social life here. As a result, there is an increased sense of unbelonging in me, as I could not engage in social interactions at the university. This made me think that I could not make the progress that I hoped for, and I started to doubt the decision of doing PhD degree in Australia. Sometimes I feel strong tension between the several factors among our research group. People express this differently. However, all of them show this tension between the eagerness to succeed and the uncertainties ahead of them. For me, it includes my strong eagerness to be part of the university as a social group and the limited time for the PhD studies. However, I feel the university did not adequately provide a platform for Global South students to make a cultural transition in the first year. Those, for me, the study and the research experiences are full of precarious moment. As I make some progress in language and communicative skill by way of exploring social interactions in the last year, I've started to feel that I'm learning something from peers and academic staff. What I've learned from them is not just academic, but rather cultural and social. I have started to establish my identity as an international academic, while at the same time increase my confidence in everyday life. So my experience shows that how important it is to build a sense of belonging among Global South PhD researchers. So from here, Michael will talk about contacting this sense of unbelonging. So over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kun Zhang. And for everyone, I'll be very, very quick. But just to say that in our research project, what came out so strongly, and I'll just touch on what Kun Zhang was saying. Kun Zhang was talking about a Global South student or students that are from other countries and don't speak the English language. And we have so many, but we don't necessarily have a sense of inclusion towards these beyond our academic skills and academic focus. What I was going to say very quickly was that we found the importance of having student agency. So creating spaces in which students can follow their aspirations and passions was so vital. Together with others, share those aspirations and passions. How can we create those stories in those spaces? And they're often they're not few, particularly in the Australian or the La Trobe University where we were. It was more serendipitous that we come together, that we create those relational spaces, if you like. But more on that, I'll pass over to Phil. Thank you, Phil, so much, please.
Yes. You know, it's been so fabulous listening to everybody talking here, and all of your work is so valuable to the world. And you just think in the next 100 years, what people are going to get from it. And our group, from Global North students and Global South students, we have found so many different forms of connection that probably we all knew about, but we probably didn't think about as students, like connection with the world, with our partners, with if we have children, our children, with our friends, with people we just see when we're walking the streets. You know, there's connections that we have all around us, and there's professional connections that are important to us. Connections, professional disconnections, when you're working with someone. And in academia, we all know it's hard. There's so much that we need to do in academia, you know, apart from getting grant money, from working with the communities, things that we have to do within the professional space. It can be very difficult, but as one of the most recent presenters said, you know, joy, love it, love what you do. And this came through in our research as well, that the people who really did well and I finished my PhD in 2.5 years, it was a 7-year PhD, because I just fell in love with it. But I'll tell you about that in a second. But there's also connection with yourself, which was a theme also that we've just touched on. You know who you are, know what you're doing, keep looking back at what your role is. And that has come through in so many of these journeys that we have explored in our PhDs, in our research. Connection with your study subject is a similar thing. Connection, actually know what you're talking about is not just something that, you know, I've just picked a subject. It might be an easy one. Many of you, the nursing PhD was fascinating, talking about corruption, you know, close to your heart. And that's going to make for a great dissertation, and obviously has. It got passed. Connection with your cohort, connection with your passion and your field, as I just talked about. Now, each of these presents a case of necessity, as we've talked about, and we've talked about some of the issues in the research. It brought up things about physical support. We had one of the members of the team who was not able to go into university because she had a condition where she was unable to tolerate some of the odors that were in university. And we all know universities are smelly, and to try and get away from that smelly university smell, they put in different odors, deodorizers, and they're the sort of things that this member of our cohort was unable to do. So physical support, being able to get into university, emotional support, fighting the stuff that we've all had to face. And if anybody here has not suffered from this, put it on the chat room now, because I'd love to meet you. It's called imposter syndrome. I am not worthy to be doing this research. That came through with our research, that all of our cohort at one time or another felt this imposter syndrome, and that is a really tough thing to fight. Even once you've got your PhD, sometimes most people that I know, and I'm just talking anecdotally here, not the research, it's very rare that you get people who will say, my PhD was fantastic, I achieved so much. Every PhD that I've spoken to has said, it was a bit of a schmozzle, my supervisor messed it up, or I messed it up, or I lost focus, or whatever. So it's actually emotional support so important, and we've got intellectual support that we need to do. There's so many things that came through in our research, but connection, I just want to quickly talk about one example of connection that came through in our work. And this was one day my supervisor and I met in the library before our regular meeting. And we had regular meetings. Many of other PhD students didn't have that. I had a great supervisor. I fell in love with my supervisor. He was a great guy, not romantically, it was certainly in the Plato sense, but I'd had a hard day. I was teaching at RMIT University in Melbourne, teaching journalism. It was very, very hard day. And I came into the library, saw him there, and he said, "How are you going?" And I said, "If it wasn't for my PhD, I think I'd be a wreck. It's the only thing that keeps me going." And he pointed to my PhD under his arm, and he said, "If it wasn't for your PhD, I wouldn't be able to keep going." And that was one of the great connections for me, that he was able to empathize, but actually that he felt that way towards my PhD. And that was one of the highlights of the whole thing. Imposter syndrome's still there. I have the doubts about the worth of my PhD, even though a lot of things came out of it, but that was so important. So what we found as, in the end, before I let you go, a few things that came out of what we had been studying. And some of them are that, yes, our fields, in the 12 people in our study, the fields were disparate. Our backgrounds were disparate. We had someone from the Philippines. We had someone from Tibet. We had Kumzang, who you just heard from. We had people from Iran. We had someone from Africa.
Phil,
backgrounds that we had, it was enormous. Yes, Michael.
Move on, man.
Yeah, well, I'm getting towards the end now, mate. Thank you very much. See, in Australia, we just move each other on, you know, it's really great. So we had all this background, and we found that there was the need for, we could connect. We really were able to connect between us despite these wide backgrounds. So it was made for a wonderful journey for all of us and the most collegial experience, but disparity does not mean you can't connect. Connection so important. Now, Andrew, you're going to discuss how university can facilitate these kinds of connections.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. So connection has been a running theme throughout our presentation today, as well as in the other research projects that our group has been involved in. Connection is also there in the stories that we have shared as research partners and as friends, and the lines between these two have increasingly blurred the more we work with each other. These connections that bind us person to person to person are clearly relational. We relate to each other as persons. We recognize how the different contexts from which we came from persist and still affect whatever shared context we have with each other now. After all, our experience of these contexts often involves ongoing shifts and dynamic engagements. For Global South students like Kunzang and myself, our contextual shifts and their impact on our personal identities are dramatic and large scale. They involve adjustments that range from the specifically linguistic to the broadly cultural. For Global North students like Michael and Phil, the shifts may not be as apparent, but they are no less dramatic. The positions that we four have gone through or are going through in what we call the academic world is a is a story of a negotiation with a distinct space with distinct practices. Who we are and what we do inside university spaces is inextricably linked to who we are and what we do outside. But the comfort with which terms like inside and outside can be used in this sentence, for example, and in similar discussions, can point to the distinctiveness of university spaces and practices. So to wrap up our presentation today and to open further discussions on the implications of the ongoing work that we have shared with you, I want to end with these remarks on the idea of the university as a distinct space and context. Specifically, I want to reckon with the idea of the university as an institution, not only in the large sense of being one among the many structures, one among the many social institutions that we find in the world, but in particular, how the university itself as an entity organizes itself through offices and agencies. This kind of organization is necessary for something as complex as a university. Standard protocols do need to be established, rules upheld as principles, activated as workflows. But then people are placed in the roles and in certain roles and functions in this structure in specific offices and departments. Now, like all graduate students, I have relied on these offices and agencies for all sorts of assistance. I find reassurance that they are there, that these offices are there, and that I know what email addresses to use to contact what office I need to get in touch with. But the real help I got, the assistance that I remember, the ones that I value, they came from persons in these offices. Whatever problem I had was dealt with by solutions and advice, but these solutions and advice were given by persons who, even in the faceless communication of professional email, gave off an air of warmth and conviviality. They weren't friends, but they were friendly. They paid attention to my questions and its specific contexts and details. And of course, they consulted their handbooks of rules and regulations, but they always took care to respond as persons. My encounters with these offices then were not only transactional, but also relational. And I think the latter is what is truly valuable. If the university could align itself more strongly with the relational, not turning completely away from the transactional properties it needs to function as an organization, but somehow making those transactional properties secondary by prioritizing person to person engagements, I think the university could uphold itself as a model for the kind of human relations that can enhance our sense of self. As naive and idealistic as all this may sound, it seems to me more fruitful to imagine the university as a model for the kind of ethical relationality we need to grow into the persons that we can be amidst a community of others. Whatever work we do, whatever tasks we've set for ourselves, whatever roles we find ourselves taking, instead of merely just taking after the primarily transactional exchanges already so common in many other areas in contemporary society, what if we humanize ourselves and our relations with others? Now, all of this, of course, requires imagination. Imagination that needs to be realized through concrete actions. I hope that our presentation today and our focus on our methods of sharing our experiences as stories and even our brief use of visual imagery, I hope all this demonstrates that as much as our own stories have done. In any case, I do feel confident that coming after the earlier presentations today, a commitment to interpersonal relationality is something that we all share in this room. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, if you have any questions for us, please, you can use the chat room. And yes, much appreciation to Michael, Phil, Andrew, Kunbang, and other presenters in the group. We'll take one question. I know Dr. Dua Fraser has been closely monitoring all the questions. Dua, would you like to talk about your podcast series that's coming in partnership with the Star Scholars, and maybe we can take one questions before we go to other housekeeping items.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Bista. Thank you very much, Dr. Bista. I'd like to mention my podcast. Can you all hear me?
So you can find lots of discussion stories with the authors, poet, and the influential personality of the society. Thank you, Dr. Fraser, for your long, outstanding podcast series in partnership with the Star Scholars Network. We'll be taking one or two questions shortly, but let me run to some of the housekeeping. I know many of you as a recent doctoral, graduates and then early career professionals, you might have lots of things to publish. I want to let you know that we have 8 professional open access journals, and these are the academic platform for you. Let us know if you are interested in serving on the editorial board of these journals or publishing with us in those in any of these journals. We do also have a book series in partnership with 4 commercial publishing house, including Routledge, Springer, Palgrave Macmillan, and some of the book projects are open access book projects, and there are no fees associated to publish in these publishing, in these projects. So here are some of the latest books that we published on a wide range of topics on teaching and learning, international student mobility, higher education, international education, community colleges, in the context of COVID-19 and others, other major challenges. So these are some of the recent book projects. Let us know if any of your projects are waiting for publications. We are very happy to support you. And then there are a couple of new books just published recently from Star Scholars Networks. These are open access books. You can download at any time. Then also we have several podcast series in collaboration with the Star Scholars Network or Journal of International Student, including Global Scholar Stories. This particular series document the experience and stories of any scholar who have published in the Journal of International Students. The Rajika Bhandari has also started another podcast in partnership with the Star Scholars Network. And we have now next a leadership webinar series as a podcast. These might be the interesting, important resources for you. We have run 9 sessions so far is for this semester, and we'll be back in the fall semesters. We were so fortunate to have more than 700 guests who attended these sessions, covering at least 20 countries and 45 institutions. So I truly appreciate the collaborations and institutional support from Morgan State University and Star Scholars Network. So we are almost toward the end of the sessions. If we have any burning questions, we can take 1 or 2 before we go. Michael?
Yeah, good day. Yeah, I just put it in the chat, but I'd like to say it again to you, Dr. Bista, and to everyone else. Thanks so much for creating this space where we can all share our PhDs and also a little bit of the journey, that very human element of our journey. I just loved some of the sharings that other people have expressed. Cheers.
Cool. Thank you. Yes. A recorded version of this session will be distributed through our listserv and the mail list of the entire Star Scholars members. We have 17,000 members representing a wide range of institutions across the globe. And also you will receive the upcoming events, including the books, journals, and our webinar or podcast series. I truly appreciate each of you for taking time to listen to us this evening and this morning, despite the different time zones. Thank you, all of you. And congratulations to all of our graduates. I will see you tomorrow in our commencement exercise, and our colleagues to Australia. Thank you so much. Have a great day.